I found a letter in my father's desk that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. But that's not even the part that broke me. The part that broke me was finding out 2 weeks later that my grandmother had known the truth in that letter for 30 years and decided it wasn't her place to say anything. It started with a folder labeled personal, tucked behind years of paperwork that looked deliberately boring on top, like someone wanted it skipped over. Inside was a single letter, handwritten, dated 31 years ago, addressed to my father from a woman whose name I'd never heard in my life. I read it twice before I understood what it actually said. My father had a daughter before he married my mother. A daughter he'd apparently chosen never to mention, not once in 31 years. I didn't say anything to my mother right away. I started quietly looking for anything else in those boxes. A photograph, tucked inside an old wallet, of my father with a baby I didn't recognize. A separate folder of receipts for child support payments, dated and organized, spanning over a decade. The same decade I'd grown up believing I was his only child. A whole decade of payments, carefully hidden in a folder he never thought anyone would open. I didn't confront my mother with assumptions. I needed to know who else had known. Because something about my grandmother's reaction at the funeral kept nagging at me. The way she'd flinched slightly every time someone mentioned my father's perfect family. So I asked her directly, gently, over coffee at her kitchen table. She went quiet, in a way that told me everything, before she said a single word. She'd known for 30 years. She'd met that woman once, briefly, at a family gathering years before I was born, and decided afterward it wasn't her place to involve herself in her son's choices. 30 years of watching me believe I was an only child, while she quietly knew I had a sister somewhere she'd actually met. That was the second secret. Not just my father's hidden daughter. The fact that my own grandmother had looked me in the eye at every birthday, every holiday, for 30 years, knowing exactly what I didn't. There was a family reunion already planned. The big one we did every 5 years, with all the extended relatives. 3 weeks out. Everyone would be there, including my grandmother. I decided that was exactly where this needed to come out. Because I was done being the only person in my own family who didn't know the full shape of it. For 3 weeks, I kept living normally. I helped plan the reunion menu. I let my grandmother believe nothing had changed, while I quietly hired someone to help locate this woman, the half-sister I'd never met, using the name from that letter. I found her 2 states away. She'd grown up knowing about us the entire time, watching from a distance, never reaching out because she assumed we already knew and simply didn't want her around. The day of the reunion, I sat in my car in the parking lot for almost 10 minutes before going in, watching relatives arrive and hug each other like nothing in this family had ever been hidden. Then I went inside. I let the first few hours pass normally, the usual catching up, the usual photos. Then, right before the big group dinner, when everyone was seated at the long table, I asked if I could say something before the meal started. The table got quiet, the way tables do right before they sense a shift. I said I'd found something in Dad's office a few weeks ago that I needed everyone to hear at once, because I was tired of being the only person who didn't already know the truth. I watched my grandmother's face change before I said another word. She already knew this was coming. I didn't raise my voice. I said that our father had a daughter before any of us were born, that he'd quietly supported her for over a decade, and that my grandmother had known the entire 30 years and chosen never to mention it. Nobody gasped. The table went still. The kind of still that's louder than yelling. My aunt actually turned to look at my grandmother before I'd even finished the sentence. Like some part of her had already suspected something was off. My grandmother tried to say she'd only been trying to protect the family from unnecessary pain. I told her I'd brought someone who wanted to say hello, and that's when my half-sister walked in from the hallway where she'd been waiting. Then my uncle, the quiet one, who rarely speaks at these things, said something nobody expected. He'd actually met her once, years ago, at our father's request, and had been told never to bring it up because it wasn't the right time yet. A letter, a folder of payments, a grandmother who'd known for 30 years, an uncle who'd actually met her and stayed silent on request, an entire family who'd apparently been managing pieces of this truth around me my whole life. I didn't wait for an apology from my grandmother. I walked over, sat down next to my half-sister, and asked her if she wanted to actually eat dinner with her family for the first time in 31 years. My grandmother called me 4 times over the following week. I let 3 go to voicemail, and finally picked up, just to tell her I wasn't angry at her for the secret itself. I was angry that she'd let me spend 30 years not knowing I had a sister who existed. Months later, my half-sister came to Thanksgiving for the first time. My grandmother still struggles to look directly at her, but she shows up every year now. And that's more than 30 years of silence ever gave either of us. I think about that folder labeled personal sometimes, tucked behind boring paperwork so nobody would think to open it. I wonder how many families have a folder like that somewhere. Something true, sitting quietly behind something boring, waiting for someone to finally clean out the right drawer. I never want to be the last person in my own family to learn the truth about who we actually are. And if you've ever felt like there was a piece of your family that didn't quite add up, trust that feeling. Mine turned out to be a whole person.